So I've taken myself out for a walk today on what's quite a frosty autumnal morning to tell you the rather gruesome tale of Gibbet Wood. And the legend goes that there was a chap named John who lived in the forest, and he wanted to go to an open air dance. Now these were quite common back in the day in the forest, sort of like Celiac dances, lots of music, lots of cider. But there was just one problem, and that was that John could not afford a ticket. Now, some of the versions of this story describe that he was better at throwing squeals at squirrels or evading the forest keepers than keeping down a good job. And so by that, they're basically suggesting that he was a poacher. So what was John to do? Well, he goes into the local village of Bramshaw and he walks into the village shop. And he speaks to the owner of the shop, little old lady, and he asked her for a loan. Now, John was probably well known in the village, and so quite rightly, the old lady from the village shop said no. Now, this caused a huge argument between the two of them to erupt. Both of them were shouting at each other, and John was getting more and more angry. And then the tale turns somewhat darker, because by some cruel twist of fate, there was an axe in the shop, and John picked up the axe and swung it at the poor defenceless shopkeeper and struck her down. So there she was, laying in a pool of her own blood. What was John to do? He set a light to the shop. So John runs back toward the village and straight into the local pub, where he shouts, "Fire, fire, fire, fire," and he raises the alarm because he thinks, if I'm the one that raises the alarm, then nobody will think it was me that murdered the poor old lady or indeed set light to her shop. But unfortunately for John, the old lady lived just long enough to tell the tale, and with her last breaths she uttered the words, "It was John." He was very quickly arrested and indeed executed for the murder of the little old lady of Bramshaw village shop. But his story doesn't stop there, because once he was dead, his body was placed in a gibbet, which is sort of like a body-shaped cage where the corpse is placed, and it's then strung up on a big tree or a hanging post, where it will swing in the breeze and will act as a warning to all who pass not to commit such a crime. Now, the story goes that the corpse hung in its gibbet for several weeks, and as it started to become a state of absolute horror, the decision was made to take the body and, rather than bury it, to actually move it away from the village further into the woods. And this is where it came to Gibbet Wood. So how does this tale end? Well, it is said that the children of Bramshaw would quite often run down to Gibbet Wood after school and tap the top of the skull with sticks to make the blue tits fly out of the eye holes.